if it's what they need and it's appropriate at the time, just be really good at it and understand why you're doing it, and have a range of other ways of interacting with players. And it's the same for coaching, and I think it's the same with ways of thinking and ways of playing. And again, I feel very privileged to have had these opportunities. You know, very often I seem to rub shoulders with people before they were famous. Kieran McKenna was one of our coaches at Loughborough, and I have to say I'm just not surprised with the success he had. I've never met anyone like him in terms of being so intense and so focused. My feeling is that while governing bodies are responsible for coach education, we're going to go nowhere with it because of the very things that we're talking about.
Discussion, welcome to the podcast. My first question, like I do with every guest, is get them to reflect back at the beginning of their journey. How did coaching become a passion for you at a young age?
Wow, good morning. Thanks for having me on. That's a really good question to get us up and running. I think it was entirely accidental. I don't think I was particularly impassioned by it at a young age. My experience of coaching was receiving coaching was in the late 70s and early 80s, and coaching looked and felt very different then. And I don't think I really had the awareness, you know, you just kind of turned up, did some training, got told what to do, and then went home, really. So I don't think as a player I was particularly that aware of it necessarily. But I think that the big turning point for me, because I've done my life and career all the way completely the wrong way round. So I left school as soon as I could, joined the military, came out of the military, was still reasonably good at sport and was involved in kind of non-league level sport. Also got lots of injuries, so I was battling with injuries, trying to play, trying to work, and we turned up to training a non-league club one evening, and it was very much a manager-coach setup. So the manager was a manager, and the coach did the coaching, and he was player coach, so he was involved, but he couldn't make training. And the manager came into the dressing room and basically said, "Oh, this lad's not coming tonight. He can't make it. He's got issues at work. Does anyone fancy doing it?" And everyone's looking at the floor, looking at the ceiling. And I went, "Yeah, okay, I'll give it a go." So I actually took training and strangely enjoyed it and got positive feedback. I mean, I was, you know, like many new and inexperienced coaching, it wasn't coaching, it was definitely a training session. And I was just doing stuff that had been done to me, really, and tried to get engagement. And from that moment, it was like, okay, I'm struggling playing. I can't really I couldn't get into the team. I was getting a lot of injuries, had a lot of back problems. And it's like, well, actually, this coaching thing could be something I could get interested in. And having done my life the wrong way round, I was working in finance, would you believe, at the time. I was pretty unhappy with that too. And I was 20, in my 20s, I shall say. And it's like, okay, I need to make some decisions here. And I actually went back to university in my 20s, late 20s, to study sports science, thinking, you know, I'm really into my sport. I enjoy being a coach, learning to be a coach, working with players. So, you know, why not try and do that for a job rather than bounce from pointless corporate job to pointless corporate job? So I went back to university, actually studied sports science. But when I went back to university, I actually thought I'd end up in a strength and conditioning place. So it was the physical training stuff that really interested me. Physical performance was what interested me to start with. And then, you know, got more into coaching with the university team, did coaching modules at university. And it's that really kind of, all the stars were aligning here. So I'm getting opportunities to coach. I was studying coaching, and it's like, okay, this is where I want to be, really, in some form or other. I want to do this for a job. So that's kind of, and this is, you know, 30 years or so alarmingly showing my age, very old person. So yeah, this is how it all started, basically, in the kind of late 80s, early 90s for me.
Was there anyone that inspired you on that journey to become a coach? Was there any moment, you mentioned obviously the experiences at a grassroots level and kind of that, having that exposure. Did anyone stand out in that respect?
Yeah, I would say it was once I got exposed to formal coach education. So I had someone, I did my, it was called a prelim back then in football before we had the UEFA qualifications. And the coach educator at the time kind of basically, I failed my prelim the first time, I don't mind saying it, and I struggled to coach in the game. The technical stuff was fine, but reading and understanding the game and intervening in a meaningful way for the players was really challenging for me. I found it very difficult and actually failed that course the first time. But I redid it and redid the assessment, and I got a little bit more experience, and then I went back and redid it and absolutely sailed through it. So it was no problem. So it was very inexperienced thing. But I think, the tutor on that course, who was very encouraging and said, actually, if you work at this, you could be quite good at it, which was very, very positive. But also, through opportunities at university, so traveling to the US, seeing different coaches working, getting involved with research and being exposed to coaches was just very, very good. So, we spent time at Crewe, and Steve Holland was at Crewe, who was part of the England setup, and obviously Dario was the first team manager there, and the way that they were doing coaching was, back in the 90s, was just like so different, and the way that they were working with players, it's like, wow, this is really, really, this is very good. I was lucky enough to spend some time with Brendan Rodgers. I actually did my B and A license with Brendan Rodgers, who even then was very, before he was famous and before he became the coach he is today, he was, working part-time in football, looking for his first full-time role. But even then, you could just see the way these, then he started working at Reading, and you watched working the youth team at Reading and how they were playing and how he was working with players. Been very fortunate enough to work with Paul Clement, who's another guy who's gone on to win Champions Leagues and those sorts of things. Who again has got a particular way of coaching, very organised, very detailed. So you just pick up these little bits from people that you come across. And again, I feel very privileged to have had these opportunities. Very often I seem to have rubbed shoulders with people before they were famous. So I've spent some time at Loughborough. Kieran McKenna was one of our coaches at Loughborough. So we ran the non-league team for three years. I was involved with the non-league team. And each year we took a student on board as part of the coaching team. And one of the years was Kieran McKenna. And I have to say, I'm just not surprised with the success he had. I've never met anyone like him in terms of being so intense and so focused and so detailed, but want to work with the players. Just an amazing young talent. And seeing him now where he is, it's like, yeah, that's just no surprise to me at all, that he's been able to achieve what he's been able to achieve, really.
You mentioned those different types of people, Paul Clement, Brendan Rodgers, Kieran McKenna.
Yeah.
What skills and traits do you think they hold to become successful? Is there anything that you picked up on?
Well, they're all very different people. They're all very, personality-wise, I don't think there's, and the research tells us, we went down the personality piece a while ago, and kind of, that's a cul-de-sac, right? There a personality. They're all very different in terms of their outlook, in terms of personality. But I think, and again, I think they're all very powerful at building relationships with players, but in very different ways. So I would say that the players that have worked with those coaches, even my relationships with them were different. But there was a connection there. So definitely that kind of that relationship thing is important. Caring for individual players, I think, has been noticeable. Actually worried about the individual as part of a group. But I just come back. All three of them, I would say, were just incredibly attention to detail, very detailed about us, about the opposition, about the way they wanted to play. No stone unturned. Everything was thought about, considered, practiced. So I guess that's an element of content knowledge, but also knowing what you kind of, where you want to go and what you want to do. So having a vision for it. Now there's a clear way of how we want to play. I know how I want to get there. I know how that I want my players to work. So I think the relationship piece, done in different ways, but that kind of individual focus is important. But also that kind of having a vision for where you want to go with the group and the team. I think are some things that I would say that I've probably seen from those guys.
We joked earlier, and you mentioned your 30 years experience from that transition from finance in your 20s, and obviously your academic career now at Loughborough. How has coach education changed? How have you seen it developed over time? Is there anything that stands out in terms of those years?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, across the board, coach education has changed dramatically. So I think when I first started out, there was very much a focus on what. So it's very knowledge driven, less a focus. So but the how to coach was there, but was very implicit. So certainly there was there was a way of coaching that was very linear, unopposed, partial pressure, full pressure game. There was a very linear process. It was about breaking things down. So the how to coach was never really discussed, but it was very much modeled. And alternatives weren't really encouraged. You need to coach like this to pass, basically. So I think over the years, there's been more of a recognition on the how to coach. So the pedagogy piece has definitely grown. People are more aware of different ways of delivering. So more of a games-based approach versus a skill drill approach or whatever it is. So I think there's more of that for sure. I always thought, particularly in football, that the content knowledge was very, very strong, and it just needed the how to coach to be stirred into it. And we did a piece of research at Loughborough about 10 years ago, and we sat through quite a few A licenses as part of that project. And I don't know whether it was my selective memory, it might have been, but I felt that the kind of the sharpness around the technical stuff had probably gone a little bit, that it wasn't as detailed about, it wasn't as thoughtful about the game as it perhaps once was, but there was definitely more how to. So, whether the balance is still right with the knowledge of the game piece versus the how to coach piece, although it's now, football have broken up across you. So you've got youth awards and you've got the UEFA route, haven't you? And there's almost two streams to it, which again is different. So, and in my most recent job with netball, the coach education is, it's kind of, it's still this, it hasn't really moved. So I think there's some governing bodies and some coach education have really thought about, have been very well intentioned and have thought about changing what they do to try and meet the needs of learner coaches, and have changed what they're doing. And there have been perhaps unintended consequences of that. You take something out, you have to put something else in, right? So there's always a choice around curriculum. Something in means something is not covered. So, whether that balance is right now, I don't know. That's open for debate. But and there are some governing bodies, there's some coach education that hasn't moved. It feels like the 90s still for some. So, I think it depends largely. But there's definitely more of a focus around being learner-centered, or thinking about the needs of the athlete or the player, and trying to align what we're doing to the people who are standing in front of us, essentially.
You said some sports haven't moved or developed since the 90s. I'm intrigued on why that might be apparent. Is that down to maybe lack of funding, leadership there? Can you justify why that might be apparent?
Yeah, I can remember sitting, working at a centre of excellence / academy, and having support days delivered by the governing body. It wasn't delivered by so the Premier League in football have taken a big step in delivering coach development. But when again, I'm old enough to remember when we went from centres of excellence to academies, the FA still delivered a lot of the support and the CPD for this. And I can remember someone from the FA standing up on doing a presentation and basically getting asked questions, and quite arrogantly really saying, well, we're the governing body, we know, you can't tell us about the game, we understand everything about the game. Because they had, at that time, I would say, quite an insular view. It was, you draw from the same well, you get the same water, right? So you could just constantly have this echo chamber. And I think some sports, it is certainly a kind of an evolution thing. They're in different stages of their evolution. And yes, I think funding is an important part of that. I think who you employ, if you never bring anybody from outside of your sport in, you do become the sport that time forgot in some respects, and you just keep doing what you're doing and thinking that's okay without really any concept of what's happening in the wider coach development space or the wider education space. So I think there's a kind of a parochialism meshed with a kind of where people are in terms of their evolution, stir in some funding issues and what they're able to do. Some sports, the coach development piece is an income generator, and it has to be an income generator for them. So that really shapes what they're able to do, what things cost, how much time they can spend on different things, and that's an incredibly influential thing. So, and that kind of agenda doesn't talk to change particularly well. Now, if as soon as you start threatening an income stream, there's caution. People go, well, hang on a minute. If we change this, suddenly we won't get this amount of money anymore that we need as part of our income generation. So, I have huge sympathy. It's hugely challenging, isn't it? But the result is you're stuck. You have this inertia where you don't really change stuff. You tickle it around the edges, but you don't really make any meaningful change. And the thing just, year after year after year is essentially the same.
What are your views on the current state of sport? So if we take football, for example, we have English coaches trying to get opportunities, ex-players coming into the game and getting opportunities, and that kind of clash that epitomises some of the things that are happening within the modern game. What are your views on it over?
Yeah.
I'm just intrigued to think about the current state of play.
Yeah. I mean, coaching isn't playing, right?
Right.
So I'm particularly uncomfortable with. I mean, I did it, and but it was low risk and low status. I literally, went from coach to player overnight, or player to coach overnight, with having no experience, and it's really not the way to do it. You need to, and my colleague Darren Watts has written quite extensively about, we trap people over a decade, or he trapped people over a decade, and even 10 years later, people are saying, that apprenticeship, that learning how to coach piece, where at whatever level, was really important for me to be to where I am today as a coach. So, coaching isn't playing. People need to learn the trade. They need to be able to evolve and grow as coaches. And then after that, the entry is the entry. I guess at the moment what are the markers of expertise? What are the criteria for getting a job? And I think that's something that perhaps we could discuss. It's not a role. It's a role not like any other, really, where we run fast and loose with the requirements for the role, basically.
Yeah, again, the reason why I ask that is obviously, Chris, my team's Birmingham, and they've just appointed Wayne Rooney, and we had a successful coach in John Hughes.
Yes.
And that debate,
yes, you did.
That debate is coming to the equation in terms of, how do we define good leaders and good coaches? Is it down to ex-playing careers and the transitions?
Well, yeah. Well, I guess that just shows how corrupt isn't the right word, is it? How bankrupt the sport is in some respects. I thought John Eustace did a decent job at QPR with, and where they are and what they've done since he left has just demonstrates how well he did. And I've watched Birmingham a few times under him and thought, again, with the resources and everything, it's like, I think he, doing a good job. But, he's not a, the new owners come in, don't they, and want a marquee coach, a name. And, I've not seen Wayne Rooney coach, so I can't comment on him as a manager or a coach, so I wouldn't know. But if I was John Eustace, I'd be pretty unhappy with it. What have you done wrong, really? Give the guy a chance. But, we know that football isn't like that, right? These people want a name and a brand and all the rest of it. So, and that's the game, right? The game stinks in that respect.
What are your current thoughts on coach education then from maybe a grassroots perspective? There might be people listening or watching this that want to maybe develop themselves within that area and they don't necessarily see themselves as maybe that elite coach. There might be parents or volunteers that are helping with certain grassroots clubs. What do you think is important within that area? And is there anything that you've researched that really epitomises strengths within developing people in that respect?
Yeah, of course. Well, I just think that thinking about how you're coaching is really important. So even we encourage everybody to do this, even getting a little, using your device and filming your sessions and just watching back what you're doing versus what you're trying to achieve. What practices are you doing? How are you interacting with your players? What does that look like? Are you happy with what you see in relation to what you're trying to achieve? So a level of kind of self-awareness and actually thinking about why you're doing what you're doing is really important. I think back to my days, I just did stuff because I'd seen somebody else do it, or I thought that was the way to do things and never really engaged any thought process like, well, why am I actually doing this? And then once you get that kind of curiosity, you can then start exploring different ways. And, for all its faults, the governing body does have mountains of resources and, stuff you can go and look at and think about in terms of what to coach and how to coach. So I think that self-awareness, along with a curiosity to try and improve and develop, is really important for grassroots coaches, really. It's important that we have a qualified and kind of licensed workforce, even if they are volunteers. So the coaching awards are important for that. But, that's not really how you get better at coaching. Really, you get better at coaching by practicing it and getting some feedback from it. So I would find, again, if I were a grassroots coach now, I would either, find somebody I respected or somebody through the governing body, say, come and have a look at what I'm doing, give me some feedback on it. That's essentially how you get better at coaching. The awards are important, but they're incredibly low impact compared to the amount of time you spend coaching. A weekend on an award will give you some information. For me, it's just kind of the front porch or the front door. It's important and it sets some standards and it gets you to a level. But really, practicing and getting feedback on your coaching is how you're going to get better.
Do you reckon there has to be some modification in that process? Because you said potentially national governing bodies have faults. Is there anything that we can share on what those faults might look like?
Go on, how do you mean?
In terms of maybe developing individuals, because you said the courses are the porch and it's a money maker, and then you're into the world,
Well, yeah. So let's get this. So for some governing bodies, the courses are really important financially. For others, the bigger governing bodies that got money, they're not. They cover their costs and they make some money from them. So that's not the prime motivator. So let's not throw them all in, tar them all with the same brush. And those where it is an income stream, it's usually because they have no other choice really. They've not got a massive. The sport isn't on TV. It's not. They need to help. They need to generate income. So I totally understand that. So let's kind of separate those guys out. I guess for me, again, when I do a review of these sorts of things, whether it's in sport or other things, I ask the question, and we measure, what are people spending their time doing? And I've done this with, I've done this in football, I've done this in a range of sports, I've done this in a range of other industries, you know. And if you want to get somebody better at coaching, they need to practice coaching. But if you're spending 10%, 9%, 5%, 1% of your time on an award practicing coaching, you're probably not going to get better at it. So you're going to have lots of awareness raising about different issues and different things and lots of interesting stuff. But unless you spend your time practicing coaching, you're probably not going to get better at it. And I don't, you know, I could throw that mud at pretty much all of the governing bodies, if I'm honest. That probably sticks to the ball. I mean, it you know, the percentage of time you spend actually practicing coaching can be in single figures on a coaching award.
Yeah.
So what are you getting better at? What are you getting better at if you're not practicing it and having someone give you some feedback, essentially, to help you with that? So that, you know, and then, you know, then we've got, well, I need to put 20,000 learners through a year. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, do you know what I mean? So you've got scale, you know, there's lots of moving parts here. And I think one of the, you know, I was involved in the early noughties with the UKCC, and it was a missed opportunity really to really reshape the landscape. You know, that it was a high tide watermark of being able to influence what we do with coaching. But basically, it was always along the lines of, we've got a weekend or we've got 2 weekends, and that's it. So whatever you do, we're changing, but we're not really changing. So the structure and format of coach education has looked the same since I started doing it 30 years ago. It's essentially a couple of weekends or a few days. It's not, you know, it's not little and often. It's not, to be fair, some sport, you know, for example, rugby union have taken a very brave, and tennis to a certain degree, have taken a little and often approach. So you do something every week or every other week for an hour or so, either yourself or with a developer, or do some learning. And I think that's incredibly brave to break out of this. We come for a weekend, 2 weekends, do your assessment, that's it, one and done. You know, little and often, get some feedback, get some practice. So I think there, you know, there may be others, but from my knowledge, you know, one of the few that are doing it is a rugby union. They've been very brave and said, look, this weekend block thing, we need to see people more often. We need to actually have a relationship with our coaches, and we need to support them as they grow. You know, they need to try stuff, come back to us, we give them feedback, and they try some more stuff on, you know. So for example, that middle qualification, that kind of level 2 equivalent, takes a year, you know, but it's little and often over the course of the year, which makes a lot more sense to me.
Is there no way of developing a community of practice in that respect, where football can learn off rugby and sharing ideas? Does that work, or inheritance to the national government? I was intrigued on
great question. I don't know the answer. It would make a world of sense, wouldn't it? I mean, I you know, I'll be controversial here. Controversially, I think that while governing, so if you think of any other industry or trade, right? So a plumber, electrician, a lawyer, an engineer, a surgeon, the employer and deployer of those people don't train them. So if I'm going to be an electrician, I go to the college, I do my course, and then I get a job as an electrician. I might have an apprenticeship, but the employer, I'd still go to college. So the person training me isn't necessarily the person who employs me. So I struggle to think of any other trade or professional industry where basically, you know, the employer deploys, you know, maybe the military, arguably, you know, the people that do that, but there's a very distinct period of training there. But my feeling is that while governing bodies are responsible for coach education, we're going to go nowhere with it because of the very things that we're talking about. You know, I think there's an argument for a, you know, like whether it's an apprenticeship or a course where you learn to be a coach, and then you go to your sport, and then you kind of, because at the moment it's just all over the place, isn't it? It's incredibly even within governing bodies, again, part of our work is looking at the fidelity of courses. So if I do a course in Nottingham and then I'm doing a course in Newcastle, what does it look like? Do I get the same experience as a learner? And even within a governing body, you'll get a completely different experience. So the fidelity of a course that's supposed to be the same is very low. So there's no real kind of, if you get a really good coach developer or a good coach educator and a good cohort, you'll have a really amazing experience. But if you don't, you probably won't. And that really is down to chance very often. What other industry does that? I mean, what other industry does that? I don't know. I don't know. So like I say, as long as, while governing bodies are developing coaches, coaching isn't going to go anywhere, really, would be my feeling. So controversially, maybe.
One thing that I wanted to pick up on was the development of sport in general. And if we take football, for example, I always find when there's a major competition, World Cup, European Championships, if there's a national team that's very successful, there's this sense of moral panic in England where we have to jump on the bandwagon, we've got to copy what the French do or what the Netherlands do. What are your thoughts on that in terms of learning from other countries and apply it within the UK? Obviously, culturally, that could be a challenge and all those other facets that are within that. What are your thoughts on that and try and develop coaching practice or even policy around other nations?
I think, there's a significant, there's some really good up-and-coming researchers. They're not all young necessarily, but they're up-and-coming, and a body of work that talks about there's no cut and paste. And they're absolutely right. There is no cut and paste. I mean, when I was younger and growing and was just a sponge for this stuff, it was Brazil and Holland were the two countries. So all of my coaching, see how old I am, coaching videos and coaching books are either from perhaps stuff from Brazil or stuff from Holland. They were the two countries, right? And then we've had Germany and Spain. And then we went through France, didn't we, with them winning the World Cup. And then we've had Spain and the influence of the Spanish coaches. So, of course, can we learn stuff from other cultures and the way other countries do things? Yes. Can we just pick them up, copy and paste them onto us? No, of course we can't, because it's different. We have a different tradition, different cultures, different ways of thinking about things. Are there things that we can learn and take? Yes, but they have to be adapted to suit us. And the issue is, by the time you model yourself on whatever the thing is, that country or sport have gone into, they've gone somewhere else. So by the time you get to where you want to be, they've changed into something else anyway. So, I can see why people do it. And it's people like sparkly, shiny things that they think are going to be great and want to have some novelty, but there's definitely no cut and paste for sure. But like with all things, there's some balance here, isn't there? Somewhere in the middle is about right. So do we not look at anybody ever because we're brilliant? No. Do we wholesale copy everything everybody else is doing? No. Somewhere in the middle is about right. We need to see what other people are doing, but we have to understand how we adapt it to how we want to play, how we want to be as a sporting nation, really.
I suppose that adaptation enables it to get complex. And again, right. The reason I say that is I was speaking to a football manager this week, and he mentions that all these new coaches are coming into the game and coming up with great ideas and great philosophies, but his outlook was just make the game simple. And that might align to what you said then in terms of this panic of we have to play like the Brazilians or the Germans, but stick to what we're good at and try and add to that to develop. I'm intrigued on what you think about that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, we've had this with coach education, right? So if you think about coaching, if we have a spectrum of coaching practice, we've got a very directed, structured, tell people what to do over here. And then at the other end, we've got a very much stand back, let them create an environment and let them discover. And they are essentially two ends of a spectrum. For me, they're all available. We can do all of this stuff. But what we've tried to do is we've literally tried to go from one end to the other and wonder why it doesn't work. We're literally lurching from going from this type of coaching all the way to the complete opposite way of coaching, right? Rather than saying, well, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's look at what we're doing here and be really good at that. And let's maybe add a little bit and add a little bit of this and just gradually move to a place where we're comfortable. So I get this, it's very often extremes, isn't it? We go from one extreme to the other, lurch from one extreme to the other. It doesn't really work. And then you're like, well, and I can remember, I grew up with the whole stop, stand still, give the player some information. I think if you do that now, lightning bolts come down on you, don't they? And you get blown up and say you can't tell players what to do. It's like, well, of course you can tell players what to do. If it's what they need and it's appropriate at the time, just be really good at it and understand why you're doing it and have a range of other ways of interacting with players. It's like, we all have a favorite meal, but we wouldn't eat it every single meal, right? We want to have a range of things available to us. And it's the same for coaching. And I think it's the same with ways of thinking and ways of play. We try and lurch from one thing to another. I can remember working with a non-league, an ex-player who was a non-league manager and was struggling, and we went in and tried to support him, and he was like throw tea, shouting, screaming, like completely that to nothing, and the players are like, don't know how to deal with you now. The players were like, and the problem was this kind of he was creating uncertainty with the group, like we don't know who you are anymore. So it's like and it was almost just be more yourself and maybe just tweak it a little bit rather than go from literally Jekyll to Hyde. It was all well intentioned. The guy was trying to do what he thought was the right thing and trying to be a better coach and a better manager, but it totally freaked the players out. It's like, who is this guy? Because it's almost there was a loss of trust there. It's like, we don't really trust you now because it doesn't feel genuine anymore. So you just have to be careful with these things and think about how and there is a change management process, isn't it? You don't literally lurch from one thing from another. You kind of, I'm going to be like this and I'm going to just try this and then add this and then add this and then gradually morph into something where I want to be, rather than go from this to this in one massive step. And everyone's like, whoa, what's going on here with that? Which is problematic, which is massively problematic.
It kind of leads me to my next question, really, around where do you see the future of coaching playing out? Obviously, during the course of this conversation, you mentioned that, it's evolved, that authenticity, as you've alluded to then, is important. That stop, stand still approach is obviously being washed out and other methods are being used effectively. Yeah. Where do you see coaching going within sport and how education will evolve around that? Is there anything you come across that you recognise?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, we have I think that coaching really is about meeting the needs of people who are in front of you, right? What do these people need? Physically, psychologically, technically, tactically. And we can't ignore the fact that the people standing in front of us are changing. What their expectations are, what they want and need from us changes. So I think that by definition affects what coaching looks like. If we're committed to meeting being player or athlete centered, which is meeting the needs of the player, and those folks are needing and asking different things of us, by definition, the coaching needs to evolve and grow with that. Now that's not to say that the tail wags the dog. Of course it doesn't. But there's how do people present information? How do people present? So for example, analysis now, players are more interested in their own individual detail. So which leads itself to more of a one-to-one kind of thing, player-led piece. And So if you've got a group of players who are used to working with their own device, used to reviewing their own material and asking questions, taking control of their own learning and performance, saying, I've noticed this, I need to get better at this, or when I play this opponent, they do this to me or they do that to me. Can we work on that in training? So that's a much more interactive relationship, a lot more player-centered relationship. So if you've got that group, that type of player you're working with, and you sit them in a room, all 20-something of them, and stick a PowerPoint on and talk at them, that's not going to work, is it? So I think, how you do coaching will change according to the needs of the players and the people that are working in front of you. And that, society's changing. The people that players and athletes are changing, and we need to evolve and grow with that. And that, by definition, will mean what we need to do and understand as coaches will change. So I think it's, there is that kind of bottom-up kind of force that's going to ask different questions of us as coaches. But, as your manager, colleague, friend says, the game's still the game, right? So there are some still things that we will need to do, how you, all of these change, but the rules of the game stay the same, the dimension of the pitch stay the same, how you win a game essentially or lose the game essentially stays the same. All of that is stuff. And there are principles of play that essentially stay the same. But for me, it's how you present that, how you deliver it, how you interact with players. All of that is the stuff that's shifting. So there are kind of levels of sameness and levels of change. And as I say, meeting the needs of a changing population, I think, is something that's going to impact coaching a lot.
Do you think that will impact maybe coaches at the highest level in terms of maybe that English representation of competing for the high-end trophies and having English managers maybe lead in other European club competitions or kind of World Cups? Or I'm just intrigued on that, because there's always that doubt around English managers, tactically, technically, whether they can do it at the high end. And I'd like to think that's changed with Eddie Howe and other managers. You mentioned Rodgers as well. Just intrigued on what you think on that.
Well, in my experience, again, this is just my experience of working with different managers of different nationalities. Nationality doesn't guarantee you anything, for sure. And there are some coaches who coach, like manager coaches who coach, and there are some that don't. So there are some who train their teams and don't really do that much. And, and there are some who are incredibly detailed and have preparation, have a way of playing, that way of playing run throughs, all that, everything makes sense. And I just think, nationality really has nothing to do with it. You're either coaching your team and preparing the team, or you're not. And generally, you can get away with intensity and bluff and bluster that only gets you so far. Being in people's faces and being intense and, sticking it in behind them and pressing and all that only gets you so far, right? It'll get you something, but it only gets you so far. There is a time when you actually have to communicate with players, actually coach the players, tell them what you want. You can have some astonishing conversations with players about what they do and don't get from their coach manager. It's astonishing. It's astonishing at the level of coaching or not that happens at the highest level in the game. So I think ultimately, that all shakes over time. That all shakes down, and the good people generally rise. If given opportunity, they rise. So yeah, we've got some great young managers and great young coaches who I think are more than capable of delivering trophies and cups for us, for sure. But do the owners give them the opportunity? We come back to the John Eustace Wayne Rooney business, don't we?
One thing that I wanted to ask you was around kind of your experience, and you mentioned your 30 years and the people that you've worked with and the opportunities that you've had. What advice would you give to maybe someone that is starting off within their career of coaching, that they want to maybe be inspired by some of the things that you've been exposed to. Is there anything that stands out on your journey that can be shared?
Yeah, I'm horribly dated now. So I'm talking about stuff that worked for me. And I don't know if it works now. People perhaps will try it and see. So I just asked people, can I come and watch? Can I come and observe? Sometimes it was connected to research. Sometimes it was a friend of a friend. It's like, can I just come and watch training? Can I just observe? Basically, immerse yourself in the environment and give yourself an opportunity to do stuff. And my very first break in, and I'm not sure you could do it now, and I'm not sure whether you'd be allowed to, but essentially, I volunteered. Said, give me a chance and I'll volunteer and come and do a little bit for you. And if there's an opportunity opens up, it's almost a glorified internship. And I'm totally against not paying people. So again, I'm incredibly dated here. But I guess the general point is put yourself out there. Don't wait for the world to come to you. Essentially, get out and try and meet people, try and network, try and observe as much as you can, get involved with as much as you can, build your contacts up. That's the advice I'd give to folks. What that looks like in 2023 compared to what it looked like in 1993, I don't know. But the principle remains the same. Observe lots of coaching, try and make contact with people, reach out. Don't be passive, basically, expecting it all to come to you, because it won't.
One thing that just struck in my mind then when you were speaking about that was the opportunity, especially from an early career student or an early career coach, around employment and financings that go with it. And you mentioned internships and volunteering. What are your generic thoughts on that? Because again, personally, from my perspective, I've been a victim of going to work for football clubs, cheap labour, so many hours, poor salaries. What are your thoughts on that in general?
Yeah, so my feeling is that there are some clubs who take advantage of people, who give you a tracksuit, maybe some, if you're lucky, some expensive, maybe a meal, and have you work, and there's no intention of anything other than using you for a year. So I don't think that's just football. I think there are a range of sporting organisations and clubs that completely take advantage of people in that respect. So again, I guess it's, with my university hat on now, and working at Loughborough, we're quite fortunate in that we probably won't engage with organisations that don't offer something. So either you need to pay them for a year, or there needs to be something else. So I can think of a couple of opportunities with really good, with progressive clubs where, people have ended up getting jobs at the end of it. So there are, you do a good job through your year, you work there, and because of the churn and turnover of staff in academies, there are job opportunities, and these guys have been in the box seat to be able to get work at the end. So I think it's just, again, doing a bit of due diligence and being cautious and not being caught a bit starry-eyed, going, I've got this amazing opportunity to work at this club. Isn't that incredible? But hang on a minute, how do they treat their, how many people do they employ at the end of this? How do they treat those folks? Do you get what do you get? So there are some clubs who have got really well thought out volunteering and internship programs. They support those people really, really well. There's a good probability of something at the end, and there are some absolute, cowboys out there who'll just take people for free and spit them out at the end and don't really care. So I think it's, it would be naive to think they're all perfect. They're not. But for me, my advice would be for anyone thinking about doing that is do your due diligence, ask about people's experiences, just really do your research before you commit to something. So I would definitely think they're worth doing for sure, but you need to tread carefully would be kind of my advice on that.
It's hard as well when you're young and a bit naive, and it's cool to have a tracksuit of a football club, do you know what I mean? And it's competitive as well. I suppose that has to be considered as well. Do you know what I mean? There's a justification on why it happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally get it. And as I say, some sporting organisations are incredibly unscrupulous in that respect and take advantage of people. because they know that there's a queue every year. There's a queue at the door for people to do this. But as the consumer of that, you just have to, just check, just be careful before you commit to something, and make sure that it might be that there's an opportunity somewhere else that at face value doesn't look as attractive, but actually will be much better for your aspirations, your opportunities, and all the rest of it. So yeah, just have a bit of, go slowly, be cautious, do your due diligence, and think about what you're going to do.
So final segment of the podcast, is there anything that you are exploring now that's really interested you in terms of your research that could be shared through this podcast? Is there anything that you've got going on project-wise that is valuable to listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about it today. So we're definitely looking at the kind of the reflective coach behavior piece. That's something that I've been working on consistently for a long time, and that's definitely evolving over time, and really understanding how we can change coaches' practice. So use technology, use analysis to really think about making a difference to what coaches do. So what are the mechanisms really that trigger change? So that's a piece of work that we're writing up at the moment around. We're awash with technology. You can analyze everything. You can use video. We can increase coaches' self-awareness by them watching video. But what are really the mechanisms that you need and processes that you need to put in place to really change coaches' practices, either as a coach educator or as a coach yourself? So that's stuff we're looking at now, and it's how do we maximize everything that's available to us to try and evolve and grow coaching, and that's based on working with it within an organization with coaches where we've had some success and some failure. Stuff has not worked, and really understanding why that wasn't the case, or it hasn't worked as well as we would have liked, and it's really understanding that. And the other big piece is taking that and putting it into other spaces. So working outside of sport, working with police, actually looking at how they train police officers to try and accelerate their learning and change their behaviour and practice. Obviously, there's some controversies around policing at the moment, and cultural change is required. So how do you do that? How do you change behaviour? So taking some of that stuff we've learned in the sporting domain and putting it into other domains about, okay, if you want to change on the street, on the turf behaviour, what things do you need to put in place to make that happen? And how do you maximize technology and analysis and all those? So that I would say those are the kind of the two hot areas right now for me.
Great stuff. Final question, Chris, and probably the deepest question on this podcast
okay.
is, how would you like to be remembered in the area of sports coaching?
I don't think that's particularly deep. I think that's a pretty easy. Somebody who made a difference. So over the last, we churn out a lot of stuff. We talk to a lot of people. We do try to do a lot of things, and it making a difference is how I would like to. When I eventually retire or leave or whatever it is, it's like, we've done some stuff that actually has made a difference or impacted what people do.
Excellent stuff. Where can listeners and viewers find you, Chris? Are you on social media?
I am. I'm at Coach C1 on Twitter, or X as it's called now. I'm on LinkedIn, and if you hit Google, I think you get a page of me if you search me on Google as well. So yeah, I'm absolutely, there's no hiding place these days, is there? So it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to find me if you are determined to. Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll put the links to your social media page in the description. So if anyone's listening or watching this, they can click the description underneath this video or sound and listen to that. From a personal point of view, I just want to thank you for your time, Chris. Obviously, working within the sports coaching discipline, I've read a lot of your work. Your work's actually very inspiring in terms of my academic journey.
Thank you.
And where I could potentially be in the next 30 years. I just want to thank you. Just thank you for your time, and good luck with everything at Loughborough, and continue doing what you're doing.
Pleasure. No, great to chat. Thanks very much.